We all know honey as that golden gooey sweetener that we drizzle on pancakes or stir into hot milk. But there's a massive production process behind every drop of honey. It is driven by thousands of tiny, hardworking bees. It's a story of cooperation between bees and beekeepers that's been perfected over centuries. Let's explore the whole journey of a jar of sweet honey, the bees and their hive. Let's start with the stars of the show, the bees. These are called the industrious insects, as they live in highly organized colonies. There are hundreds of thousands of bees that live in those colonies. Each colony and all of the bees living in them are ruled by a queen bee. This queen bee is basically the largest bee in the colony. Queen bee is the Beyoncé of the hive. She lives like royalty. Hence, she lays up to 2,000 eggs per day instead of working. She makes sure that the hive is constantly stocked with a new generation of workers. She also ensures the survival of the colony by keeping everyone in check. But the real heavy lifting is done by the worker bees, which are all female, of course. They are called the multitaskers of the insect world. They nurture the young bees, guard the hive, and most importantly, collect nectar. The male bees are called the drones. They get the ultimate short end of the stick. And what about their job? Well, they get only one job, mating with the queen. After that, their purpose in life is pretty much done. Nectar collection. Once the queen sets her colony in motion, the worker bees take over. We owe our sweet honey to these sweet little working fellas. You might think, what's their mission? Well, it's collecting nectar from flowers. And they're pros at it. Worker bees head out of the hive in search of flowers. They look for plants which are nectar-rich, like clover, lavender, and wildflowers. Bees have long tube-like tongues, called proboscis. When a bee finds a flower, she uses her proboscis to drink the nectar. The nectar doesn't go directly to her stomach, though. It's stored in a special place that we called honey sac. This honey sac is basically a backpack for all the nectar she'll bring back home. Once she's got a full load, she heads back to the hive. Now, nectar collection is not the only work they do. They also help plants reproduce. As they move from flower to flower, pollen sticks to their fuzzy little bodies. When they move to the next flower, the pollen gets transferred and helps the plants with cross-pollination. So we can say that while the bee's out shopping for nectar, she's also helping keep the ecosystem alive. Waggle dance. When a bee returns to the hive with her nectar haul, she doesn't just head straight inside to rest. In fact, she gives the other bees a heads up. And how is that? Well, she does a little performance by shaking her body. And this performance is famously known as the waggle dance. The waggle dance is basically bee GPS. The worker bee shakes her body and wiggles in a figure-8 pattern. This isn't just some bee party trick. It's how she tells the other fellow workers where to find the best nectar sources. The direction of the dance shows the angle they need to fly in relation to the sun, and the duration of the dance tells them how far to go. It's bee communication at its finest. Once the directions are clear, other bees follow suit and head out to the nectar hotspot, turning nectar into honey. Back in the hive, the nectar still has some work to do before it turns into honey. The worker bee spits the nectar from her honey sac and hands it off to another bee. Yes, that means the nectar gets passed around from bee to bee. But there's a reason behind this. Each time the nectar passes between bees, it gets mixed with special enzymes in their saliva. This process breaks down the complex sugars in the nectar into simpler ones like glucose and fructose. This sugar transformation is key to turning thin, watery nectar into thick, sweet honey. Once the nectar has been chewed up and mixed with enzymes, it's deposited into the hexagonal cells of the honeycomb. But the nectar is still too watery at this point, so the bees need to thicken it up. They fan it with their wings and create an airflow that helps evaporate most of the water content. As the liquid evaporates, the nectar becomes thicker and stickier, which eventually transforms into honey. Capping the honey. Once the honey has reached the perfect consistency, the bees seal it off. They use beeswax to cap each honey-filled cell and preserve it for future use. These little wax seals keep the honey fresh and ready to eat, whether it's for the bees or for us humans. After all, the bees don't make honey for fun. They make it to feed the colony through the winter months when flowers aren't blooming and nectar is scarce. The honeycombs are basically the bees' pantry. When they're hungry or need energy, they uncork a cell, and voila! They get an instant energy boost. But thanks to the beekeepers, we humans get to swipe some of that sweet, sugary liquid too. Beekeepers' role. Beekeepers play an important part in this whole process too. And no, they don't just walk into the hive and grab the honey. Bees are protective of their hard work, and they'll sting if you threaten them. So, beekeepers have a special trick up their sleeves: smoke. To harvest the honey without causing chaos, beekeepers use a smoker filled with burning pine needles or wood. The smoke makes the bees think there's a forest fire nearby. When they sense smoke, bees go into a feeding frenzy and gorge themselves on honey. This thing calms them down. It's kind of like giving them a snack to distract them. Once the bees are busy eating, the beekeeper can carefully remove the hive's wooden frames, which are full of honeycombs. These frames hold all that golden goodness, honey. Extracting the honey. Once the frames are out of the hive, the beekeeper takes them to the honey extraction process. The first step is to remove the wax caps that the bees used to seal the honey cells. This is done by using a special tool called an uncapping knife or an uncapping machine. The beeswax is shaved off and reveals the honey present underneath. Next up, the uncapped frames are placed in a honey extractor. This machine works like a giant spinning top. It spins the frames around rapidly by using centrifugal force to fling the honey out of the cells and collect into a tank. It's like shaking a bottle of ketchup, but on a much bigger scale. The honey is now free from the comb. It is filtered to remove any stray bits of wax or debris that might have slipped into it during extraction. After filtering, it's ready to be stored up and enjoyed. Some honey is also sold in its raw form, while others are pasteurized for a smoother and more shelf-stable product. Comb honey. Not all honey is extracted from the comb. Some beekeepers produce something known as comb honey. This honey is left in the original honeycomb and sold in chunks. Comb honey is all about being natural. You can eat it straight from the comb, wax and all. To store comb honey, the beekeeper cuts the honeycomb into pieces. They use a heated knife, which seals the edges of the honeycomb. This process prevents the honey from leaking out. Comb honey is a real treat because it's completely raw. It gives you that crunchy, chewy texture from the beeswax, along with the smooth, sweet flavor of the honey. Liquid gold. Once the honey is harvested, some of it goes straight to the market. But what happens when producers have more honey than they can sell? They let it granulate. Granulated honey is basically a crystallized form of honey. It's still perfectly good, but instead of staying liquid, it develops sugar crystals and hardens. Some people even prefer this texture, as it's spreadable like butter. When the market demand for honey spikes again, producers can heat the granulated honey back up to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. It turns it back into liquid honey without losing any of its sweetness or quality. Lifespan of a beehive. A single hive can produce up to 7 pounds of honey in one day. That's way more than the bees need to survive. This is why beekeepers can harvest the excess without harming the colony. But bees are constantly working. As long as the flowers are blooming, they're out there collecting nectar and turning it into honey. In a typical season, beekeepers will harvest honey multiple times. They make sure to leave enough behind for the bees to eat through winter. The colony survives year after year, with the queen continuing laying eggs and the workers repeating their cycle of nectar collection, honey production, and hive maintenance. Modern beekeeping. The method of beekeeping we use today is efficient and humane. Before the mid-1800s, harvesting honey meant killing the bees. But in 1851, an American beekeeper named Lorenzo Langstroth invented a new way. He created removable honeycomb frames. These frames allowed beekeepers to extract honey without destroying the hive or harming the bees. This method is still used today, and it revolutionized beekeeping. Now, honey is harvested with minimal effect on the bees. It allows them to continue thriving and producing honey season after season. Honey production is a complex and fascinating process. From worker bees who collect nectar, to the queen bee who keeps the colony in check, to the beekeepers who carefully harvest the honey, it's all a team effort. The result is the sweet, golden honey we love. If you find this journey as fascinating as I did while telling you, give this video a thumbs up. Do you have any questions related to bees or any facts that you want to share? Drop them in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss any of our upcoming updates. Thanks for watching.